ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
I will look at the economic and social regulations. Last time we talked about competition policy, which included competition law and competition regulation. So for today, I'll talk more about regulation, and it could be economic or social. Yeah, we shall see the types of regulation, what entails economic and what's entailed in the social regulation. Again, the whole interest is to the government to control the market so as it serves the public interest, yeah, society interest, yeah. Because of course we are assuming the government knows the best, knows the interests of the society, public interests, and society is made of consumers and producers, but it has to operate or manage the market such that the interests of the consumers and producers are taken into account. Yeah, not one at the expense of the other one. Yeah, there could be cut-offs, there could be trade-offs. So we shall see where trade-offs are involved, because you cannot have one policy protecting interests of two, as it were, antagonistic groups. Yeah. So sometimes you have to make a trade-off such that you minimize the losses, total losses on society. Yeah. So in this case, let's look at what you need to achieve today. We should be able to distinguish between economic regulation and social regulation. We should be able to recognize practical difficulties that arise when regulating the prices charged by natural monopolies. We shall define what a natural monopoly is, but of course, this I'm assuming you already did it in under microeconomics for natural monopoly. I even gave examples last time of natural monopolies, particularly farms like water, electricity supply. In some cases, given a geographical area, it's only beneficial to everybody in society if one farm produces that particular service. Because if you have two, then they are going to be, the cost of production are going to be high, and hence prices of that service are likely to decrease. So in that case, the government may allow one farm to produce that service, but of course under regulatory conditions, under some set of rules and regulations. Then we need to identify potential benefits and possible negative side effects of social regulation, and understand the foundation of antitrust laws and regulations. Yeah. So we are going to have also a session on antitrust laws and regulation, whereby which are mostly social best, as we shall see as we go along. So there are two basic types of government regulations: the economic regulation of natural monopolies and non-monopolistic industries. Yeah. So we saw those natural monopolies and non-monopolistic industries. We shall see example again. Then social regulation of all industries. Yeah? So economic and social. So regulating both types began early in the developed nations. The developed nations have been having these regulations since the 19th century into the 20th century. They have been having these regulations. Again, is the common good. The government, as a custodian of the interests of all in society, has a role to play here. Yeah, to maximize welfare for society. Yeah. So basically, we are saying there's economic and social regulations. Now, natural monopolies. This is a unique group of monopolies. Yeah. This is where regulation started with natural monopolies. As I've said, the best example in any economy is production of power, energy, electricity, and provision of water, goods that are consumed by everybody, or almost everybody in society, and also commodity that in a case whereby if you allow replication, the cost of production go up. So what's a natural monopoly? Natural monopoly exists in an industry where a single firm can produce output, such as to supply a market at a lower per unit cost than can two or more firms. So again, I told you, an industry is made of firms. Where you have one firm, you have a monopoly. Two firms, duopoly. Few firms, oligopoly. Yeah. And of course, many firms, you have perfect competition. Tend towards perfect competition, through monopolistic competition, as you saw, different shades of competition. So we are saying here, a natural monopoly exists in an industry where a single firm can produce output, such as to supply the market at a lower per unit cost than two or more firms. So if you allow two or more firms, the unit cost of production will go up for that particular commodity. But if you allow one firm to produce that commodity, the unit cost of production will be lower than having two or more firms. Yeah. So examples are electricity and water supply industries are often considered to be natural monopolies. Yeah. And there are many other examples, but these are the most common natural monopolies in many economies based on geographical boundaries, of course. Yeah. So if one firm can attain lower per unit cost, yeah, and behaves responsibly, then the government has minimal control. The government will have little regulation to undertake. But the problem is you can allow one, and inefficiencies set in. Yeah? Inefficiencies like overemployment or wastage of resources just because you are the only one producing that particular commodity. Poor planning, poor organization, and generally inefficiency, which will raise the cost of production again up, yeah? At the expense of society, of course. The welfare of society will be affected, because you feel you are the only producer of that commodity, you are the only supplier, you allow inefficiencies, and hence the cost of production starts to shoot up. So why regulate natural monopolies? They need to avoid duplication of facilities. You want to avoid duplication of facilities, like if it's water supply, you don't have to have many pipes running across the city. This pipe is for company, farm A, this one farm B, this farm C. that's a duplication of facilities, and hence the cost of producing water to the city residents will be very high in that particular city. So they need to prevent industries from earning monopoly profits. Monopoly profits is what we call abnormal profits in some books, or supernormal profits. So these are profits that you get because you are able to determine the price through output, or you're able to determine output through pricing. So you have some control, in fact, significant control on the market. So regulation aims at denying you monopoly profits, yeah, supernormal, abnormal profits. Because even in a perfect market where there are many producers and many consumers, farms that are breaking even earn normal profit. So this is the whole thing. Society will benefit if all farms earn normal profits. So that the moment you earn abnormal profits, people should be able to come in and compete until every farm breaks even. And if farms are making losses, then people are free to leave that industry until those left behind earn only normal profits. So as we saw last time, by earning normal profits, you deny society the opportunity of maximizing welfare, or opportunity of maximizing utility from the given resources, the economy. So you can regulate through marginal cost pricing. Remember last time we said in any market, it be perfect or imperfect, all firms, in order to maximize profits, because that's the objective we're assuming of firms, profit maximization. Of course, that means revenue maximization or cost minimization. So you're able to maximize your profits. The point where you maximize, you meet that condition, is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So you can see that one, long run marginal cost meets marginal revenue at QM. So at QM, marginal revenue equals to marginal cost, which means that's the profit maximizing output for that farm in that industry. Yeah, that industry maximizes profit when it produces QM on the horizontal axis. That's where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And that's the golden rule, where the two equal the output at that level, you're maximizing profits. But the issue is, how much price should you charge? Because I told you there are two critical decisions made by firms in business or in markets. How much do I produce, and what price do I charge in order to maximize profit? So there are always two things, minimum things to meet. How much do I produce to maximize profit, and at what price do I sell? So in this case, you're producing QM because that's where marginal cost equals to marginal revenue. But price is at point F. Yeah? Point F, that's where the demand curve is. The demand curve is given in green. As I said last time, demand curve is the same as average revenue, yeah, which is the same as price. So in a imperfect market, demand curve, that means demand equals to price equals to average revenue. We saw that. But in a perfect market, demand is equal to average revenue, is equal to price, is equal to marginal revenue. That's the difference. So in the imperfect market, marginal revenue is below the average revenue, which is also equals to price. And that's the demand curve. So the green is the demand curve. So you can see if you produce QM, you can sell at OPM. Yeah? PM will be a unit price. Each unit will go for PM, price at price PM. So you produce QM determined by intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue, but then the price, you charge that price on the price line or in the average revenue curve or the demand curve, and that's PM. So you can control, you can regulate this market by bringing by playing around with the marginal cost, as we shall see. So you see here, you have forced, you have forced the farm to produce at point B, yeah, where marginal cost equals to average revenue. Remember, if you left it on its own, they will produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. But now you want the farm to produce at point B on the marginal cost curve, yeah, because you are regulating through marginal cost pricing. So what happens here? The farm produces more than it produced earlier. If there was no regulations, you see it's producing QM, but now it's producing Q1, which is much higher than QM. So consumers benefit. There's more water, more electricity in the city, yeah, because you are regulating this farm to produce through marginal cost pricing, yeah, so that you produce where marginal cost equals to average revenue, not marginal cost equals to marginal revenue, yeah. Marginal cost equals to average revenue, which is the price for the demand curve, green, yeah. So at that point, you produce Q1, but you are selling at what price? Remember the price, the demand curve is equal to average revenue, which is equal to price. So you'll sell at P1. You produce Q1 and sell at P1 because the demand curve is at point B. You cannot sell higher than B at point B. You cannot have a price higher than P1, yeah? Because you look at the demand curve, where it's meeting the marginal cost curve. You are stuck at that price. So you're producing more and at a lower price. Those are the two things that happen through marginal cost pricing. The government is able to make the farm in that industry produce more of that commodity and at a lower price. Yeah, P1 is much lower than the price before. P1 is less than PM, and QM is much lower than Q1. So society or consumers benefit. They have more of that commodity in the market and at a lower price. But the farm in the industry, for every unit of Q1, they are selling at P1. So their revenue is O, if you take origin to be O P1, B, Q1 is their total revenue. If they sell all units Q1 at price P1, their total revenue will be equal to O P1 times O Q1, the length times width. That rectangle will represent the total revenue because OQ1 is produced and each unit of OQ1 is sold at OP1. So the total revenue would be OP1, B, Q1, that rectangle. But look here, when you produce Q1 and you produce Q1, the unit cost, the cost of producing each unit of water or electricity is represented by a long run average cost curve, the blue curve. So your average, the unit cost of producing, the cost of producing each unit of Q1, it is represented by that line from Q1 to the point B, to the long run average cost curve, the blue curve. So each unit you are producing at a higher price than it. That you are producing, the cost of producing each unit is higher than the price you get from each unit. The cost of producing each unit cost is higher than the unit revenue. Yeah. Because Q1B is the price, but the unit cost of producing Q1 is much higher than the price. And this one is represented as losses. You can see the losses rectangle. Those are losses because the width shows the losses you make per unit. And then the length shows the number of units you have made, which is Q1. So the losses are the difference times Q1. So in other words, the firm under marginal cost pricing regulation makes losses. It makes losses. So how does such a firm remain in the industry, remain in the market, in the business? They cannot. Because if you're making losses in the long run, you have to leave that industry of supplying water or electricity. So what happens? The government has to subsidize the industry, the farm, isn't it? For the farm to remain in the business in the long run. Otherwise, in the long run, it will be gone. So for it to remain in the business in the long run, the government subsidizes by covering those losses so that the farm just makes normal profits. Yeah. So in that case, if something like water, you can see the government does a lot of subsidy on such items. Yeah. Because everybody must take water anyway. It doesn't matter whether your income. Yeah? You must take water. There's a minimum body requirement for water in terms of quantity and quality. So to make sure everybody has water, the government has to produce enough water for all people in that city or that country. And in that case, it means forcing the farm to produce OQ1 instead of QM. They produce Q1, more enough water for everybody. And in that case, it means at that place, at that time, the farm is meeting losses because the cost of making 1 liter of water is higher than the price they get from 1 liter of water. So the government has to pay for the difference. That's subsidy. Yeah. But of course, why should the government spend tax money on this? It's because it has to guarantee everybody gets enough of that commodity and at a reasonable price. Yeah. Affordable to the people. Yeah. Irrespective of your income, your wealth, or whatever. Yeah. So this regulation through marginal cost pricing. This is what we mean by regulating the industry or the farm through marginal cost pricing. So that graph is a very good, illustrates very well that principle of regulation through marginal cost pricing. The next graph shows a case whereby you have average cost pricing. Average cost pricing. Here, what are you doing? You are now the demand curve. You produce where the demand curve meets the average cost curve now. Previously, you produced where the demand curve was equal to marginal cost. That's what you call marginal cost pricing. Now, in this case, the farm is required by regulation to produce at a point where demand curve cuts the average cost curve, the long run average cost curve. L means long run. So you find long run marginal cost, long run average cost. So in this case, Q2 will be produced in the market. So you see the quantity produced now is lower than when you have marginal cost regulation, marginal cost pricing regulation. The point at which you produce, the quantity produced is lower. Previously, under marginal cost pricing, we produced Q1. But under average cost pricing, now we are producing Q2. That's the first thing you notice. There will be a shortage of supply of that particular commodity, represented by Q1 minus Q2. So society or the economy will be faced with a lower quantity sold on the market, equivalent to that space Q2, Q1. First observation. Second observation, look at the price. Before the price was P1, but now it is P2. So the consumers have less to in the market, and that less, the smaller quantity is at a higher price, P2, compared to P1. Yeah. So point C is a point whereby the quantity is lower and the price is higher. So if you produce Q2, you sell each unit at P2. But how about the cost of producing each unit? Remember, average cost curve is passing through that point C. Yeah? Average cost curve is passing through point C. So which means unit cost is equal to unit price. When unit cost is equal to unit price, you are making normal profits only. Yeah? The total revenue will be equal to total cost. So you're just making normal profits. So in this case, lower quantity, higher price. The government does not need to use taxpayers' money to subsidize this commodity in the market. The industry or the farm is just making enough profits to remain in the business. There's no abnormal or supernormal profits. It's only normal profits. Yeah. So in this case, the losses are not there, abnormal profits are not there. Secondly, the government is not using taxpayers' money on this commodity. Yeah. So this through average cost pricing regulation. That's the scenario. So we have looked at regulation of natural monopolies. Let's now look at the case whereby you are regulating non-monopolistic industries. Non-monopolistic industries. Again, here you are trying to provide a system of safeguarding the interests of citizens. Two common rationale for government involvement. Why should the government come into the market, into the industry? Because of market failure. The market does not operate in the interest of society. Yeah. Generally, that's what you'll say, market failure. Yeah. Or asymmetric information. Yeah. Information is not symmetric to all in the market. People have different levels of knowledge about a commodity. Its quality, quantity, price, and all its characteristics. We shall see examples. So there is what you call Lemon's problem. When there's a potential asymmetric information problem, bring about this thing is potential asymmetric information problem, bring about a general decline in product quality. So you may because of asymmetric issues, you may not know, you may not have equal information amongst or between individuals or among individuals. Yeah. So we can see that in that case, people cannot make maximum decisions like only maximizing utility, yeah, or even maximize. You may not maximize profits because the information you have is not sufficient, for instance, or you may not maximize utility because the information you have again is not sufficient. Or implementing consumer protection regulation. You want to protect the consumers. Consumers are a vulnerable group on the market because there are many ways firms or industries can camouflage, for instance, their products in terms of packaging, advertisement, information, the information you give the consumers. Yeah. So here the government comes up with a consumer regulation through liability laws, government licensing, and of course, we said earlier, direct economic and social regulation. So social regulation apply to all firms in the economy. It's designed to improve the functions of the market, increased regulation results in a higher production cost, however. If the government has to continue regulating the market, the industry, there are costs to it. Cost of supervision, enforcement of the law, the personnel required, the resources required to enforce the law can become quite costly. And these costs, if they are passed over to the firms or the industry of the farm has no alternative but to pass over to the consumer. You see. So again, as we say, the government should regulate the market, the industry, we should remember that the cost of compliance by firms can end up being shouldered by consumers and hence affecting their welfare. So that's one side effect of excessive regulation. You can see regulation is good in that in one case we saw it allows more to be produced at a lower price, where the farms were making losses and the government was subsidizing. But also a case whereby the farms produce a little bit more and charged a little bit higher price, the average cost pricing regulation. But there are costs incurred by the regulator to achieve these objectives. These costs can be accumulated by farms and the industry and eventually given to the consumer to shoulder. So they may wipe out the benefits of regulation that the consumers enjoy. Yeah. If you're not careful, as you regulate the industry, maybe to the interest, mostly the interest of the consumer, you may end up, the consumer may end up paying for this through higher prices due to the excessive cost of compliance. Because if you're a farm in that industry, compliance may mean putting stricter quality controls, maybe compliance on environmental pollution may mean cleaning the air before you release it into the atmosphere, or cleaning the water before you release it back into the water bodies, the rivers, the oceans, the lakes. Yeah, but this costs there is not the farm going to shoulder. I mean, in most cases, it may pass over these costs. I mean, a greater proportion of it to the consumer. Yeah. Not, of course, not 100% always. In some cases, a significant percentage. Another side effect to this regulation is smaller farms are denied free entry into that industry because they may not be able to comply given the regulatory mechanisms in place, which may be costly for starters or for small farms to meet and still make a normal profit. However, social regulation normally should benefit society in the long run. In the short run, it may have those side effects, but in the long run, at least it should benefit society through safer products brought into the market, safer workplaces, clean environment in which to work, in which to live. Yeah, because the government or such regulatory bodies, their interest is not only economic; they go beyond economic targets. They have social and environmental targets. Yeah. So you want to bring all this into play so that economic costs may be there in the short run, but in the long run, there are those social and environmental benefits and even economic benefits. So when you analyze this regulatory mechanism, it's best to look at what happened in the short run and what will happen in the long run. Number one. Number two, it's good to look at the variables from the economic, social, and environmental aspects. Because it's not just economic only or social only. There are also environmental aspects that you look at, like safer workplaces, clean environment, and even safer products. Not just cheap products, but safer products. Second-hand clothes. You can see now in this Corona era, many governments have banned the importation of these clothes. Okay, the short run, individuals will suffer. Those who used to rely on that market for clothing. But in the long run, they will be better off, they will be healthier. They have been prevented from transmission of any viruses or germs in this second-hand clothes. So what we are saying when you look at regulatory practices by the government, look at it in the short, medium, and long run. Secondly, look at it from the economic, social, and environmental dimensions, so that you have a complete understanding of the issue at hand when you make policy. Yeah, not only for short run, but also for the long run. Not only economic benefits, but also social and environmental benefits and costs. Look at all that. So this is how we analyze policy and regulation for the economy, for society as a whole. So let's look at some incentives and costs of regulation.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Something called capture hypothesis. This is a cost of regulation. We have seen one of it is to have higher costs of production, which are ultimately, to a great extent, absorbed by the consumer. And also it prevents new entrants, particularly small farms, to enter that industry. But also regulators themselves can easily be captured by the special interests of the industry. We usually say the hunter can become the hunted. You are hunting an animal, and then people end up hunting you instead. This is what I mean by a hunter becoming the hunted. So you are a regulator, and you end up being captured by the interests of the industry. You have public interest to protect, but the narrow interest of the industry absorb you. That's what you mean by capture hypothesis. So we have to look at that as we enforce regulation, or we put up laws or policies for regulation of the industry. The possibility of the regulators motivation or purpose for regulating being absorbed by the interest of the industry. That's why people recommend a theory, what we call share the gains, share the pains. Yeah. Don't just share the gains alone, also share the pains, the benefits and the costs. So the regulators must take account of the demands of three groups: legislators, those who make the laws, regulated industries or firms, and consumers. There are three main groups that when you do regulation, you should look at. The consumers, first of all. Yeah, consumers. Yeah. After all, the producers are also consumers anyway. Then the farms or the industry, the producers, the sellers. And then the legislators, those who legislate regulation mechanisms, put together laws, control measures, yeah, so as to reduce imperfection in the market. So you give me a policy, I would like to analyze it through, look at it from capture hypothesis point of view, and also who shares the gains, how are gains shared, and how are the pains shared, how are the benefits from the use of limited resources in society shared in society, and how the costs of the use of resources in society shared in that society. And then these two, suppliers and consumers, in between, there's a regulator, a legislator. So benefits of regulation, as you have said, it offers potential benefits, as you have seen. However, quantifying the benefits to the consumer, to the producer, is not easy. It's not easy. There are many ways of doing it. Economic costs and benefits are easier to quantify than social costs and benefits. Social costs and benefits are very difficult to quantify because most of them don't have a market. You cannot quantify things like, it's not easy to quantify. You can quantify things like good health, education, effect. And even more difficult to quantify are environmental costs and benefits. Environmental costs and benefits. As we have said, you have to do these things in 3 layers: economic cost benefits, social cost benefits, environmental cost benefits. In the short run, in the medium run, and in the long run. Then cost of regulation. Government uses taxes to pay for the cost of regulation. For the regulator to work. In Kenya, I told you we call it competition authority. Competition authority of Kenya. It's a whole paracetamol. So it's sustained for taxpayers' money. So it's a cost to society. And also we have seen a case whereby the government may want the farm to produce more, but at a lesser price. In that case, the government has to subsidize the production of that farm or that industry. Again, that's tax money. And the trust policy. So main aim of one trust policy, and this one again, you tell me if it's Ethiopia, if you have a trust policy in Ethiopia, please somebody should find out that for us. If possible, share the trust policy for Ethiopia. So it's meant to promote business competition. The best cases quoted in many books that you'll be reading, or the ones on the reading list, are antitrust policies or antitrust laws by the US Congress. Very good examples quoted all over the antitrust laws by the US Congress. And there are 4 of them mostly. There are others, but the 4 are the most prominently quoted in scholarly work. Of course, of the 4 is the Sherman Act. Sherman Act. Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. What does it say? Section 1. Every contract, combination in the form of trust or otherwise, or conspiracy, in restraint of trade or commerce among several states or with the foreign nation, is hereby declared illegal. The key word there is restraint of trade or commerce. Any action that restrains trade or commerce is illegal. So they want free trade, free commerce. So that means moving towards a perfect market. So this is not just domestically, but also globally, internationally. This is what this section 1 of Sherman and the Trust Act of 1890 states. I know some of you, 1 or 2 are lawyers. Please get for us this equivalence in Ethiopia and share with us, please, so that we have relevant examples. Section 2 of Sherman and Trust Act of 1819 states that every person who shall monopolize or attempt to monopolize, not just monopolize, but even attempt to monopolize, or combine or conspire with any other person or persons to monopolize any part of trade or commerce shall be guilty of misdemeanor. Will be guilty of misdemeanor. So just conspiring to monopolize or monopolizing through conspiracy or any other acts with respect to trade or commerce shall be guilty of that offense. That is Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. So it's you now to find, as I've said, antitrust policy of Ethiopia. It may not exist explicitly. It may exist under other laws or under acts in Ethiopia. You have to collect all this, so long as it relates to trade and commerce, and document. Another one, I said that there were four, the Clayton Act of 1914. Apart from Sherman Act of 1890, there is Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914. It was passed to remove vagueness of the Sherman Act. Of course, when they were running the Sherman Act, there are people, lawyers know, there are people who always find the gray areas in a particular act and take advantage of it for defense against accusation by the government or by the regulator. So they realized there's a lot of gray areas in the Sherman Act. So they passed the Clayton Act to take care of these gray areas in the Sherman Act. That's 1914. Then we had the Robinson-Patman Act of 1936. It amended Section 2 of the Clayton Act. It is designed to protect independent retailers and wholesalers from unfair discrimination by chain stores. Chain stores. Remember, wholesalers get from the producer, goods and services from the producer, commodity produced. From the producer, normally it moves to a wholesaler, who then retails it to the consumer. So producer, wholesaler, retailer, consumer. But when you have chains, even in Ethiopia you have chains, supply chains, chain stores, whereby the producer moves to the consumer direct or cuts off retailers and wholesalers. Yeah, in that case, Robinson-Patman Act protected those in the wholesale and retail business. Robinson-Patman Act of 1936, because it was felt it was tending towards monopolistic behavior. Who is exempted from antitrust laws in most countries? Labor union, public utilities, we have talked of water, electricity, natural monopolies, professional sports, cooperative acts, activities among exporters, hospitals, public transit and water system, supply of military equipment, joint publishing arrangement in a single city by 2 or more newspapers. And there are reasons why they are exempted. So for you, it's to find out who are exempted from antitrust policy of Ethiopia. Find out and why. There are reasons every country will give, every government will give, or the regulator. We are exempting the following for these reasons. Because it cannot be passed by parliament or any other body like that without sufficient explanation as to why certain categories of suppliers of goods and services are exempted from antitrust policy. So what's important here, for this lecture, I'm just explaining what they are, but you have to find the application. the Ethiopian law, the constitution, and any other instruments that are used by the government for purposes of trade and commerce. So let's look at antitrust enforcement. Monopolization. Who undertakes monopolization? What's monopolization? The possession of monopoly power in relevant markets. If you possess monopoly power, we have seen types of monopoly powers, how they are acquired and exercised. Yeah, by producers. Some are monopolistic from consumers. Possession of that power. So the willful acquisition or maintenance of that power as distinguished from growth or development as a consequence of superior product, business acumen, or historical accident. So they're saying here, monopoly acquired, except from the following. You can also acquire monopoly through growth or development. Yeah? Because you are making superior product. Your product is so superior that people just follow it. You should not be penalized for that. It's because maybe you're invested heavily in research and development. Yeah? To come with a product that meets the interests of Ethiopian consumer in that particular market. You should not be accused of possessing monopoly power or monopolization. Yeah? Because this one, you have come up, you're not idle, you're not lazy as a firm. You're only thinking ahead of what the consumer wants, and you invest research, investigation, innovation, yeah, into that product. You improve it to meet most of the consumer needs. Then in that case, you'll acquire monopoly power. That type of monopoly power is not the one we're talking about. Or because of business acumen, business wise decisions, you may acquire monopoly. Again, that's not the monopoly we're talking about. You may want to call it positive monopoly, yeah, in that case. Or historical accident. Yeah? You may just accidentally become a monopoly power in that particular industry. Maybe because the strategic location of your business. So when we talk of monopoly, we're not just talking of the size of the company. No, most people think monopoly is a big enterprise, concern, business. No. Look at the percentage share in the relevant market. Yeah. It's percentage share. That's what we mean by monopoly. We look at the percentage share. What percent are you holding in the market? This is the market for laptops. What percent do you hold in Ethiopia of that particular laptop? So we usually consider a firm to be a monopoly if it has a share above 70%. Then you are considered to be a monopoly. So you don't have to have 100% control of the market to be a monopoly. Anything ranging between 70% and 100%, you are considered to be a monopoly. And this one is a general rule of thumb. So again, you should take out for Ethiopia. Who is a monopolist in Ethiopia? According to Ethiopian law. So when you talk of markets, talk of two elements: product market and geographical market. When you talk of, because when you talk of monopoly, we have said controlling anything above 70%, you are a monopolist. But in which market? How do you define that market where you have said 70%? How do you define the market? All items produced by different firms in the market have identical attributes. This includes substitutable products. That's the type of market we are talking. You cannot compare laptops to radios, for instance. Laptops and radios have different products. They're not homogeneous. They're not identical. They don't have identical attributes. So when you talk of monopoly for laptops, we're talking laptops, not other electronic gadgets. Yeah? Because electronic gadgets differ in attributes. So you have to analyze each one according to attributes, identical attributes. Then you say, now who controls this? If I'm controlling 30% in the radio and 40% in the laptop, you cannot combine this and tell me now you are 70%, so you're a monopolist. No, these are two different markets. So that's what we mean there by becoming very clear of what we mean by market when you talk of monopoly power. Also, we look at the geographical market, the geography of your market, not just from the product, but also the space you control. Geographical boundaries include all area that items are sold. All area of the items. You cannot say if you produce in blue Lectana area and you sell up to Addis Ababa and you control 40% in Tana River, Tana around Lake Tana, and 30% of a particular product in Addis Ababa. That is 70%. So the product is yours. We are talking of the total market, geographical market. You cannot just say now in Tana I can only control 40%, but in Addis Ababa of the same product I control 30%. So I'm not a monopolist. No. The geographical area in which you sell that product is what we consider. If you sell in 3 different districts in the country, we put together that geographical area, that item, what percent you control in the entire area, not individual geographical areas. No, all markets where you sell your product. Enforcement and trust enforcement. Product versioning and product bundling. These are terms you'll get in the journal papers as you read, as you prepare for your presentation. These are terminologies I will be expecting to hear from your presentations. Product versioning. What's product versioning? Selling a product with altered forms or functionalities to different groups of consumers. Altered forms. Particularly things to do with soap, toothpaste. These things are, you can alter the forms of these things. Yeah? Even tables, even laptops, you can alter the forms or functionality, how it functions. And then you set different groups. So in this case, you may want to say, well, I produce this product, so do not consider it with the altered form. Because people hide behind product versioning. Yeah? So you don't want to reach 70% to be considered a monopolist. So you try to version your product. Yeah? To hide the fact that you are actually a monopolist. You reduce the percentage seen. You have SOP A, SOP B, SOP C. If you add together, it goes 70% or above. You're a monopolist. So the versioning does not assist you to claim that you have no monopoly power. Then another area that people use, product bundling. This is whereby you go to a shop, they give you soap plus toothpaste. So they say this one product. No. Product bundling also, you cannot, if you use it again, the enforcement will know. that you are bundling products to hide your monopoly power. So these two strategies are used by monopolists to hide their monopoly power through product versioning or product bundling. Example of product versioning: software version, professional and standard edition. Yeah, you can see in the software that we use on these laptops. You can have a professional one for professionals and another one, a standard edition. Yeah. So you alter the forms or functionalities of that particular software version. Yeah. So you can claim that you only provide professional when we know that you also provide the standard edition. Yeah. You are the same person, but now you want to hide behind the two. Product bundling example, as I've said, selling two commodities at the same time, like Microsoft Windows and internet browser software. Yeah. That's an example of product bundling. Just like I gave here, offering two or more products for sale as a set. Enforcement is through Supreme Court interpretation. In most countries, authorities use market share test and determine relevant market. So for you to be determined to have monopoly power, it is something that people go to court. Somebody denies, I'm not a monopolist. I'm not a monopolist. Proof. It's a contestable issue. Yeah? So here you have to define, what do you mean by market share? What do you mean by relevant market? What's the test for market share? So it's a legal issue here. And that's why I said, I hope the lawyers of this group will present a paper from the legal point of view in as far as defining and enforcing these antitrust laws. So as you can see, even from the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, the whole thing was to encourage competition. Why do we want competition? Let's say at global level with other countries. You have this one, you must have done it under international trade. The principle of comparative advantage is a whole topic on its own. So please, you have forgotten, you have to revise this principle of comparative advantage to help you understand some regulatory practices. The effect of tariffs on trade. The effect of quotas. So you must know what a tariff is. The effect of a tariff. You must know what a quota is and its effect on trade. And also you must understand how restrictions on trade decrease the wealth of a country. How is that when you control the trade? Can you prove that with control of trade, countries will become less wealthier? You should be able to explain this from your international trade knowledge of international trade. It's a whole course that you did. So this course assumes that apart from knowing perfect and imperfect market, you also know the effect of tariffs, quotas on trade, and hence the need for regulation, so that we have less restricted trade in order to create more wealth. Lastly, you should also know who gains and who loses from trade restrictions, particularly international trade. Not just domestic trade alone, but even international trade. Who gains when there are restrictions? Tariffs, quotas, for instance. Who gains? And who loses? You should be able to explain this from your knowledge of international trade. So these are things that I expect you to ground yourself again, apart from just time I required you to read on perfect and imperfect market. Now for the next lecture, I would like you to revisit international trade and read it alongside these 5 bullet points. What is comparative or absolute advantage? What is tariff and its effects? What are quotas and their effects? What is the effect of restrictions on wealth created through trade? Does it decrease or increase trade? Wealth created through trade. And who are the losers and gainers when there are restrictions? By your own country or by foreign countries? Restrictions can come either from your country or from other foreign countries. Who gains and loses? Domestically and at global level. This is just to remind you the definitions. Is to do with opportunity cost. If you revise your international trade, these are the first topics that you cover. Absolute advantage, comparative advantage. These are terminologies that I will expect you to have for Thursday lecture with you. Please revise the last 2 slides, topics, mention the last 2 slides because they are going to occupy our next lecture. And they touch on trade, particularly international trade. So that when you look at regulation, you will understand why we regulate at the national level and at global level. Because in our mind, the freer the trade, the more wealth that's created globally. And hence, all countries benefit in accordance with the comparative advantage proposition. So please try to grasp the basics of international trade in preparation for the next lecture. Thank you. That was our last slide. And as usual, I would send the slides in 1 or 2 hours time. You'll have the slides. And please use slide 32 and 33 to prepare for the Thursday lecture. Questions? Comments? Today we seem to be full house. We are 8. Huh?
Thank you, Prof.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
I was
Prof.
just going you to say to show me that you are alive on the other side.
Yeah.
So here I'm talking like a madman. I don't know who I'm not seeing people I'm talking to. So people passing
This is Thomas again.
that I've gone mad. This professor is mad.
On my side, it is dark.
Yeah, I can now see Thomas again waving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting dark. My place is dark.
It's dark.
Yeah, that's
I'm
why.
on the border. I'm on near the border, Kenya-Uganda border. I came to do some shopping here for my family. Small town there called Busia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So we meet on Thursday.
Yes.
I will send the slides once I reach home. It's about 1 hour's drive up home.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጉታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ICM ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን እውን ያድርጉ።